Hello, everyone. Welcome to John Moseman Live. I am your host, John Moseman. I am delighted today to have a guest with me who um, has an interesting point of view about the world, and that's kind of what my show is about. For those who are first-time viewers, John Moseman Live is about open and important talking about things that maybe people don't always talk about out there, or at least to a certain degree. Um, and I do want to give apologies. For some reason, my camera is not coming on. I have no idea why. I don't know if it's a Google thing or if it's a computer thing. But otherwise, I know we'll be delighted to hear from our guest. I know she's got her camera going on there, so you'll be able to see her. But my guest today, her name is Albany Rose. She's a co-founder on the group SecularTv. It's a channel and a website with all sorts of different entertainment and shows. And I'm sure she can tell us some other things about what she's involved in here as well. But where I kind of got notice of Albany is when a friend of mine who is an atheist says, you know, I was on the show with Albany, and she's a Pro Life Atheist. That kind of just made me stop and go, wow, I've never heard of anybody being openly pro-life and being atheist. And I thought that would be just an amazing story to tell, because I think everybody's story has something of importance to the world. So thank you, Albany, for being on the show. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Sometimes that happens. That's what they say. The show must go on. But thank you and welcome to John Moseman Live.
No, thank you so much for having me, John. This has probably been my most eagerly waited interview and discussion, so I'm very happy to be here and answer whatever questions you or anyone else out there might have.
Well, thank you. If you do have questions for Albany, you can give them to me a couple of different ways. You can actually go on my Twitter account, which is at JOLEMO376, and just hashtag JML, and just ask your questions for Albany. I will try to get them all. If I don't, please feel free to give them there, because I know she'll find them, and perhaps if you want to have a conversation with her, I know she's more than willing to do that, and I don't want to promise that for her, but I'm safe to say, because we just talked about that before coming online, that you said you would. So, and then perhaps we may do a follow-up interview and maybe get to some of those bigger ones. For now, really what I want to do is kind of find out who Albany is and how she got to this place where she's pro-life and atheist, and I don't want us to just focus on the 100% the pro-life issue here, because obviously you have two different things. You're pro-life and an atheist. So for my guests and for my audience who are watching, Albany, why don't you tell us how it is, first of all, you became atheist, and how you, after that, came to be a pro-life atheist.
All right. Well, I have been an atheist for 7 months now, and it was in the beginning of June. For about a month, I had been going back and forth and questioning myself on my beliefs. I was not religious. I didn't believe in the Bible, but I always just had faith there was a God. And one night I was lying in bed, and this is after a week of saying I was an agnostic, because I was confused. I wasn't sure, and now that I know more about the terms, that probably wouldn't have been the best one, but that's what I labeled myself. And I started watching YouTube channels of some of the larger YouTube atheists, and it came down to a question that I had to ask myself very seriously, and it was, why do I believe in a God but not the book where this God came from? And it sounds so simple, but that's really what did it for me. And then when I came out as an atheist, it was about a struggle for a month or so. but it stuck, it fit, and it's where I feel comfortable. It's right to me. But I was actually pro-life before I became an atheist. I've been pro-life for 3 years now, and to be honest, I did question my pro-life views. I questioned every view that I had. And outside of me becoming an atheist, so far, I haven't really changed too many of my views. I've become a little more lenient on certain ones, but otherwise, most of them have stayed the same.
Now you've described yourself as a pro-life atheist, and so I would say it's pretty self-explanatory what an atheist is. It's someone who does not hold the belief that there is a God. You don't believe in a God for whatever reasons. There's a lot of different reasons why people don't believe in God, whether it be looking into science or looking into just big questions that they just don't have answers for. But why don't you describe for us or define for us what you think is pro-life? Because I'm sure there's people out there who might want to know what you mean by pro-life, because there's a lot of definitions for people out there for what pro-life is. And I know for people in the pro-life movement, there's even probably a division between what exactly that may entail. But if someone was to ask you, which I am right now, what does it mean to be pro-life? What do you think is that definition, and how you qualify for that?
So the technical definition of being pro-life, start there, is to be against the legal termination of a pregnancy. That's it. For me, it has to do with innocent human life. You have a lot of, most of the pro-life movement is Christian or some sort of theist, and they are pro-life across the board. They don't believe in the death penalty and birth control and many other things. For me, I take it as I am pro-life when it comes to innocent human life. In certain aspects, I actually am pro-capital punishment, which is not popular. I don't like hormonal birth control, but I support it. So for me, it is simply protecting innocent human life. It's about equality of mother and child. And a lot of people don't like that because you have something that we have dehumanized, the fetus, the embryo, the zygote, the blastocyst, and then you have a woman that you can see and that you have emotional feelings for and a human connection towards. But to me, it is about equality, and it is about understanding that a fetus is no less important than a child that is born.
So would you say that for yourself, would you disagree with people who would say then that you have to be about some of these other issues? I know, for example, in the Catholic Church, which is where I know you were there for a while, I don't know how long, you can elaborate on that if you wish, but I know for people that are, because I know there's a lot of different spectrums. For some evangelicals, there are people who are pro-life and pro-death penalty. But I know in the Catholic Church a lot that there's a sense that not only are you against aborting children, but that you're also against contraception, that you're against certain birth control, that you're against the death penalty, and that it's kind of a more reaching thing. Would you still include people who define it that way as part of your overlapping view of what pro-life is, or would you say that people have to be a part of that specific viewpoint for you?
I'm really glad you asked that. I don't like creating division within movements. I'll be very honest and say that I think the pro-choice movement has us beat on not being divided. As long as you're pro-choice, you can be one of them. Whereas in the pro-life movement, unless you believe everything in the little boxes that people prepare for you, you can't be what they want you to be, and you can't be pro-life. I think someone can be pro-life and pro-death penalty. I think someone can be pro-life and anti-death penalty because they don't have to do, even with just the legitimate definition of what pro-life and pro-choice is. I have friends all across the board. I am not as extreme with with being pro-death penalty, but I still would consider myself that. And I have plenty of people tell me that I can't actually be pro-life now. And I fight that, because if someone is willing to stand beside me in a good and kind and a loving manner to fight me against abortion and the injustice that we see it as, then I will fight with them, regardless of any other belief.
I think that sometimes there's a lot of people out there trying to figure out what that means to be pro-life. For me personally, I do believe that those other values should be upheld if you advocate that. But I don't believe also that you can just say that because one person doesn't follow your preset value structures that they can't be as equally defined in that. So I do think that it's important, and I wonder if you would agree with me, to just say if you're going to talk about pro-life, especially in a more organized way, or even on a platform in the media, that we focus it on abortion and focus and concentrate and unite on the issue of abortion. Would you say that's probably a fair thing to think?
Absolutely, without question.
What do you say to people who say, well, she's just an atheist. She just started being an atheist, so it may take her a while to kick off this, to get rid of the pro-life stuff. I mean, it's kind of a process to get rid of all the other trappings of being a Christian. What would you say to people who say maybe you're still in a phase, or you're still in a process where you're not actually at the place where you're now to a level of being an atheist?
I tell them that I've already lived out my pro-choice days, and they're behind me. I am completely open to becoming pro-choice. I simply haven't found a good enough argument to become one. And until someone comes up with a new argument, it's not changing. But I hear that a lot. I came out with a video on my own YouTube channel called From Christian to Atheist, and I basically go through all the different religions I've been through and the beliefs and the faiths, and I bring up, that I'm pro-life and I used to be pro-choice, and the atheists that were commenting were almost like sad and sympathetic. They were like, "It's okay, you'll eventually stop being pro-life," and it was very strange to have that window opened of seeing how people are. Like, even though abortion has nothing to do with atheism, people expect you to be it.
Right. I kind of see it the same way with black people who are conservative, where they're not really black people because they're not liberal. That in order to be a real black person, you have to be of a particular political party or political ideology. I think this is some of that fundamentalism we were talking about before we got on the show, of this idea that if you want to encompass yourself only in this one group, you have to be, and obviously there are certain things you have to oblige. I mean, but I would say of any group, the atheists should be probably the most open group of how many people could be fit under one umbrella. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Unlike when I became an atheist, and I was kind of telling you about before the show, I joined a bunch of different atheist groups. My husband is a traditional Roman Catholic, so I couldn't really go to him for answers or how I was feeling. And I was in most of these groups. Most of them I was in for a week and then I had to leave. And then the other ones I got kicked out of because they didn't believe I was an atheist because I was pro-life. So I got kicked out of them. And it was very interesting because I see atheists treat atheism like a religion, and it's not. They don't have a holy book or scripture or text to read from that tells them what the rules are, and yet they've created their own rules when it has nothing to do with their lack of belief. So no, I absolutely agree.
Thank you for saying that, because I say that often, and I get into some pleasant comments on Twitter with some of my atheist friends on that. If I was to ask you, who do you think is more critical about you being a pro-life atheist? Is it atheists or is it Christians? Or is it kind of they're both on equal footing of how much criticisms they're giving you? And perhaps could you give us an example of how each group has criticized you in trying to be a pro-life atheist?
Absolutely. At first I thought it was Christians, and then I thought it was atheists, and now it's like week by week. It just switches off. For the most part, the Christians are okay. It gets a little frustrating when they know I'm an atheist and they still try to make me use God as a reason, which doesn't work. But for the most part, the Christians are okay. You have really extreme groups like AHA who believe that unless you accept Jesus Christ as your Savior and Lord, that you can't be pro-life, that you can dislike abortion, but there's no way you could actually fight against it, even if you show them you are. And then with atheists, I think if I was to really look at the situation from an unemotional standpoint, I think it's more of the shock that makes them jerks, to be honest. I mean, you don't hear, there are millions of secular pro-lifers. There are millions of atheist pro-lifers. But a lot of them are part of select organizations and groups. You don't have a ton of people like myself that jump out and say, I'm not really part of any of them, I'm just me, I'm an atheist, I also happen to be pro-life. And I think it's just more of the shock that they become kind of, jerks to be a good one. But if I had to pick examples, really like with the groups that I joined, they could not handle an atheist that was pro-life. And I wouldn't even bring up being pro-life. I've learned that that's not something that I bring up just because. They would basically add me, stalk my Facebook, see that I was pro-life. I would be trolled like no other, and then I'd be booted. And I think that's been the biggest problem in the atheist community is people will like me, they'll talk to me, they think I'm intelligent or they think I'm funny, and we'll have this great conversation, and then they find out I'm pro-life, and they will immediately stop talking to me.
Do you think there's a future for people who are pro-life atheists? I mean, do you think you'll ever get a good enough consensus to say this is a legit thing that people who would normally criticize it and say, look, you can't be an atheist and feel this way or look at the world this way or agree with this, that's how you would look at it? Do you think there's going to be others out there, or do you think it's going to be silent? I would imagine, at least for now, on the internet, there'd probably be quite a bit that would be quiet because the atheist group the community does tend to hark on you pretty bad if you do something kind of out of line or out of step and lock with what is okay. I just want to know, is this something because of you, or is this something that you think could happen with other people, or how do you think that will work?
Oh, other people, exactly. I think it's because, so atheism is already a minority, and then you take the pro-life atheists, and that's an even smaller minority. It is a speck, but it's growing. I would ask anyone out there to check out Secular Pro-Life. You can look up a pro-life humanist, all run by great friends of mine, New Wave feminists, which they have secularists on there. There are so many, I mean, gosh, they even have an LGBT pro-life organization that's nationwide. And it's growing. And yes, in a sense, it is quieter because unless you go looking for them, it can be difficult to find them. They stay in their own little realm, and that's why I do what I do. But I do believe there is a future for people to no longer question if someone is a pro-life atheist or not. You hear, oh, I'm an atheist and I'm pro-life. It's like, oh, all right, cool, whatever. I do believe we will get to that point. It might take a little while, but we'll get there.
Now I'm going to have to ask you this. This is going to be a little bit more of a hardball for you, just to switch things up a little bit. A lot of atheists lean hard on science. They lean hard on evidence, material proof, and for a lot of them, they believe they have the science for being pro-choice, and for some of them even being so ardent pro-abortion. So what do you say to the people who look at it and say, look, there's nothing scientific, and you can't really be an atheist there because it's all about science, right? What would you say to people like that who say, you're wrong on the science, this is just perhaps more of a personal issue or an emotional issue and has nothing to do with being an atheist, and that this view somehow will kind of be, that it's somehow you're kind of just accepting it as being part of who you are, but it really has no place in atheism because it's not, and I'm going to use these words, quote unquote, scientific. I would ask how you would look at that.
I don't believe either side owns the science to abortion, whether it's right or wrong. I was the pro-choicer that said we have all the science, and I've been the pro-lifer that says we have all the science. And in this last month, I have been being open to dialogue, and I'm realizing that neither side has it. We see the science, we see the facts, we see if it's human, and then at that point, it simply comes down to where along the spectrum does human life become valuable to us? Is it at conception, when a human is conceived, but the viability is not there, it feels no pain, it has no consciousness? Is that a human? Is that a human being? Is it a person? And I mean, take person. Persons is our own definition by law. Person isn't, it's nothing but that. And so it really comes down to where you want to draw the line. And I think that's important to get out there now, and I don't think a lot of people are going to see it that way, because people want to believe they have all the answers, that they're right, nothing could ever possibly come between them and their science, them and their facts, when in reality with science, the facts are there. It just comes down to where do you want to put yourself on that spectrum of something is important and it's not so important.
I think that's a really great point that you put on there, because a lot of it has become, where do you value life, to what degree you value life, and how you value life. I've always personally found that I have a hard time seeing people care more about a seed or a plant than they do a human, and just have the reckless disregard they have for human life has just been tragic for me. But do you think this is one of those issues where people who are trying to say, you know, if you're not scientific on this, or you don't have this, what we think is a science on this, that you're not being scientific? And I would ask you this, because this would also go into maybe some of your atheism. How would you respond? Because it does seem that there's a segment of being atheist that I would call it almost scientism. I mean, it's almost like this cultic idea around what certain things that comes off as science or is supposed to be science, and really is just a couple of people in the lab coat's opinion about what the reality of the world is. I don't know about you, but I do believe there are people that are out there who are atheists who are atheists for very emotional reasons, who have had very bad experiences. And so I guess, how do you deal with the group who says it's all, make sure you got to be logical about this, in the group that has gone out there and said we've had some experiences? How do you look at those two things, especially now knowing that you probably have a lot of people within the atheist community who probably disregard anything you say because you're going against the science on abortion?
So whenever people want to talk about the science and logic of everything, if we're going to go that route, then you do take emotion out of it. And if that's the case, then yeah, I could be pro-choice. And if I ever become pro-choice, chances are I won't actually care about any human life. And this is personally, I want to say that. I don't want people to think that I'm saying if you're pro-choice, you don't care about human life. Most pro-choicers I know are beautiful human beings who very much cherish life and where they value it. But for me, if we're going to look at it from purely science and logic, we shouldn't be emotional, we shouldn't be attached to just about anything in this world. A child dies in a car accident. You want to look at that from a scientific standpoint? Another human died, it's helping the population, we can make more. No emotion. But if I said that, if I was like that, I would be destroyed verbally, probably shot, because we don't do that. We have a higher level of consciousness that allows us to feel that, to have that emotion. And that's something I don't feel we should take for granted. There are certain aspects of different debate topics where we need to have that logic, we have to have that reason, we have to have that science, and that's important. And it is important in the abortion debate, because without the medical field advancing, we're not going to know as much. We can't form our opinions as well as we want to. But there is a point, and I know a lot of people want to feel like this, but there is a point where we have to look at our emotions. We have to say, where does humanity start? Where is our own humanity when we're allowing this to happen? And I know a lot of pro-choicers out there watching this right now are probably saying, you know, I only care about the fetus, and it's not the same as a newborn, and emotion has no place in the abortion debate. But I guarantee that person's a hypocrite, because if you're pro-choice, chances are you view the mother up here where the fetus is down here. You have an emotional attachment to the woman. You have an emotional feeling about how she's a person and she deserves better. That's still emotional. So I think science can take us so far, and that at one point we need to branch off and say, okay, where do we place the value? And of course that's just opinion-based, but we need to start somewhere. We need to bring that humanity into such an extreme topic.
Well, I want to thank you for your candor on that. I agree that in a lot of things now we lose the humanity. And I have noticed the same thing you have, this idea of putting the life of the mother and the freedoms and the idea that the woman's rights are being somehow disinvolved if she has a child. There's something about that, and I know you're a mother, correct?
Yes.
You are a mother. To me, and I'm sure your husband probably feels the same way, coming from his religious background. But you know, in Christianity, being a mother is a very sacred image. I mean, it's a very sacred thing that we uphold motherhood. And what can be this? What's behind this idea that somehow, if a mother has a child or is having a life that maybe she did not expect to have, that she's somehow losing right? I mean, that just, to me, now that you're a mother and you have gone through an abortion, how do you just look at that? And to me, it completely complexes me that people come to that conclusion when I don't know if that one is there already. You know, the only time that they want to be a mother is when they actually want it. I mean, I struggle with that, but why do you think that is? So some of the reasons why they uphold that emotional connection to the mother, because they do, and I'm thankful that you did put that out there, because I know I had one atheist give me a question, and his question was, you know, how does a fetus anatomy trump a woman's autonomy? You know, and even then he goes to talking about your father and about the story you've had about abortion, which I do want to get to that too. I want you to talk about your story, because I'm imagining that your experiences have helped bring you to this point. I mean, obviously that's for everybody, right? Our experiences define to some extent who we are. But what would you say on that? Just your personal opinion. Just on why people do put them that kind of mother's democracy, the mother's freedom, the mother's quote-unquote rights that are being infringed upon for allowing a child to live.
Kind of going back to what I was saying, how we dehumanize the fetus. We can't see it. We can't necessarily touch it. We can't form that bond. But we see a woman. We can feel her. We can breathe in her scent. We can speak to her and have a dialogue, and we can create that emotion. We can't do that with a fetus. Even with a newborn, we have that, you know, you can hold, you can touch, your natural instincts kick in of a mother wants to protect and a father wants to protect the mother and child. And I think it's come to the point where we are detaching from our humanity. even though we can see it now, we can see the fetus, we can see the heartbeat, we can detect the EEG waves, we can detect so much, and yet it's almost this fear. People always say how, you know, the mother's more important because of her, because of where she's at in her human developmental stage, and the zygote, embryo, fetus is just a cluster of cells. But then you have to think about, well, a newborn still isn't at that stage. You do have a toddler who still isn't at that stage, a teenager, or an adolescent, a teenager, an adult, senior. There's always more to grow. And when it comes to the bodily autonomy, what that is no one has the right to basically use your body, touch your body without your consent. And that's just flatlining a definition. I view it, and of course, by law, we see it as the mother trumps the fetus. But all laws are made through emotion, how we feel. So with mine, I see two cases of bodily autonomy here. Yes, you have the mother whose body is being used by a fetus. A lot is being done there. The fetus is, by definition, it wouldn't be a parasite, but in a sense, yes, it's parasitic. It is feeding off, it's using her body. But then again, you have the fetus who is the one person in the abortion whose life is being taken, who gets no choice. And to me, excuse me, and to me that's also a violation of bodily autonomy. Again, person is what we decide it is. We can see throughout history how many different people have been told they're not people, and so we can do whatever we want with them. And I think we really need to evaluate what's being done during an abortion and why that line of bodily autonomy is not so cut and dry.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think we can see correlations between what has happened with minorities and women in the past, slavery, and the idea of dehumanizing them. And you know what's interesting to me when we're on this subject? Why do you think many people in the pro-choice movement escape this little fact that Margaret Sanger was a racist, and that a lot of abortion and being okay with abortion, which is to some degree what pro-choice is. I know that a part of that is about being for a woman's right to do with her body, but ultimately a part of that is also acknowledging that she has a right to do something that has been supported and has been encouraged and made popular, and an organization like Planned Parenthood that was created by somebody who wanted to help, Hitler create, not exactly help him, but it was a long...
Oh, no, they were close friends, actually.
Oh, I know that. I mean, I know that they knew each other. But, I mean, that kind of shared that same view about the superior race. I know, I don't know how much you know on the eugenics movement, but, I mean, that's there. And so it kind of does shock me that people who are for and I do want to make sure for my audience, and thank you to those who are watching live, and those who went to johnmoseman.net and watched it there, thank you very much. Again, if you have any questions or comments, you can go to my Twitter account at JOLEMO376 and give questions there. But I do notice this idea of talking about equality and about rights, and yet, a lot of abortion has been, a lot of people who are suffering from abortion are low-income minorities. We know there's a fact out there that tells us that the majority of people who are having abortions are African Americans, and so I just want to know how, I know probably how you might feel, but I mean, do you think that's something to be considered when talking to people who are pro-choice, and not necessarily, because I don't think a one answer fits all, but for those who would probably be so animate about pro-life being somehow infringing on people's rights?
No, absolutely. So I don't support Planned Parenthood. It doesn't mean I don't support certain things they do, but seeing as how I view abortion as the termination of a child, people have to, and when I say this, people have to kind of step outside of their head for a minute and understand where I'm coming from. I wouldn't support an organization that does all these nice things and then in the back room terminates a kid. So I don't support them. And when it comes to Planned Parenthood's history, where Margaret Sanger was one of the founders to Planned Parenthood, and it wasn't actually originally called Planned Parenthood. It wasn't family planning, but it was something along those lines, and then she eventually took over. I tend not to bring that up specifically, mainly because people don't want to listen to it, and I find it gets off track as much as I wish people would know their history, because, all right, let's say, because most pro-choicers are liberal, and this is just off the top of my head, let's say we had a Republican candidate running for president, and their great-great-grandfather used to be part of the KKK. People would freak out, and I mean, they would destroy this person over their ancestors. And yet you have these same people who support an organization and love an organization that helps women, and yet one of its founders, one of her quote, I mean, you can find all of these online in her books. I own many of her books because I don't like just taking people's words offline. And she believed that a large family should kill their younger children because it was more merciful to the rest of them. That's not someone I want to look up to, or an organization they start I want to look up to. You take New York City. In New York, they abort over 50% of the black children that would have been born. They're literally killing off their own race, in a sense, in New York. People don't want to look at that. And while I think that's much more of, I don't want to say semantics, but I think it's important to look at, but I also notice how many people don't want to look at it. It's like they would have to acknowledge that abortion is, what is the right word? That abortion is killing off our own race, our own everything, in a sense. And when we look at how many abortions are taking place in low income, I think we also have to step outside of the abortion debate and look at how society is failing these people. We have to look at how we're failing them to where they feel like they have to go have an abortion when chances are they probably don't want an abortion. I know very few women that truly want the abortion. They just feel internally that it's their only choice. And I think we as a society need to begin branching outside of the abortion movement and help these people as well. We need to get them out of that poverty stage.
And I was just going to ask you that because I personally believe that you can't just say, well, I'm against abortion, and then, well, that's it. That's the end of the thing or whatever. I mean, I do believe, and I think you probably would agree with me, we've talked about this a little bit in private, that a big part of trying to solve the issue is dealing with the societal impacts and societal issues that create those kind of barriers or create kind of illusions, if you will, on what exactly what choices they are. I mean, and I think it's not a surprise that the same people who feel like they have no choice when it comes to abortion probably also feel like they have no choice when it comes to having to go get their cash checked and having to pay an outrageous amount of money, having to pay all that interest. I mean, it kind of tends to be, we have a lot of companies and a lot of organizations that look to take advantage of low-income people, of poverty people, because they are uneducated about those choices. Do you think this is something that perhaps pro-life could get into, people who are actively pro-life, that can probably start to get the conversation rolling, that, we're not just talking about telling women when they can or can't have an abortion, or just even talking about the abortion itself, but realizing that there's probably some other big issues at play. What would you say, and would you add anything to that, to what maybe we could go in other areas of culture? Because I know we talked about this in person as well. I personally also do believe that I'm not for trying to politically go after this and trying to make a law, because right now our society is so divided that I just don't know how that law would work. I mean, it's not that I don't want a law. It's not that I want, abortion. It's that I don't know how it works without trying to impact culture. And I feel the same way about the gay marriage issue and such forth. So let me ask you this. Do you think that there are other areas besides the one we just mentioned about low-income families to help support this idea? Because to me, I believe to be pro-life also means to be pro-families and supporting people and having the rights to live a life where they're not forced to make these kinds of choices.
Absolutely. To me, while in a sense, to me, we're all hypocrites when it comes to our definitions of whatever. I mean, to me, being pro-life also means you support government assistance for these people to where they can get out of that stage. And even though it has nothing to do with being pro-life, I would add that as a definition. I think it's not just a pro-life issue, though. I think it's a human issue. Pro-life and pro-choice spend so much time fighting about who's right and who's wrong and who's really the pro-woman and who just wants to hate women and control women that we're losing focus on the people who are also already born, the people who are needing that type of help right now. And instead of fighting and hating each other, we could actually combine and work together and do our best to help them. And I think that would be the most powerful thing we could ever do. Because yes, while we agree on so many other different issues like abortion, there needs to be this front of helping people, especially low-income houses and people who already have 3 children at home. I said this in my last interview, but 61% of women that have an abortion annually already have at least 1 child at home. And in the pro-life movement especially, and it's sad, sometimes it seems like we don't really care about that other child at home when we should be viewing that child and the one inside her womb the same. And I hope that makes sense to a lot of people out there, but it may not.
No, I get where you're going, and I think, again, and I think we'll go in this direction here, because we have talked a bit about people who are pro-choice, and then we'll talk about people who are pro-life. We already talked about there being a division, because there's people who say, look, let's focus on the issue of stopping abortion because it's a sin, which a lot of people do, and even both sides of the camp who are Christians on this could say that, or a lot of people could say that, are going to say that. But there's definitely a divide between people who also see it being more than just a issue of outlawing and making something illegal, but also talking about other things that are adjacent to it, like education, like income equality, and those kinds of things. With so much division that's going on in pro-life, can pro-life sustain an active campaign? I know you're going to be going later this month, correct? Next week, yeah, to the rally, because I know January, this is National Right to Life Month, and I know a lot of people get active. I've always wanted to go out to Washington, D.C. and do it. As far as I've ever gone is Denver, which, for those who are watching, by the way, there's probably only about 200 and something miles between us, so it's kind of unusual that I feel like you're my next door neighbor, because I'm usually talking with people all over the place. But do you think the pro-life movement, as divided as it is, can it sustain a campaign enough to where we can be effective about some of these things? Even the most basic thing, which we all should agree on, which is that terminating life is wrong.
Oh, absolutely. So in the abortion aspect, we're already seeing that we're making waves. And I know people, this is where people are going to like cringe and freak out. They're going to forget everything else I've said because they're just going to get mad at me. Take Texas. We made an amazing stride in Texas. And the problem is a lot of people aren't reading what actually is going on in Texas. They just think we've taken abortions away and now we're evil, and there's a lot more to it than that. But we're making waves in the pro-life movement by laws, by having women look at their ultrasounds, so before they go into an invasive procedure, they at least know what's going on. And then in the all-around spectrum, what we're doing to help people that already have born children. To be honest, I don't know if we're doing enough. I don't think we're doing enough. I think society is still failing, and I think it's because of that division. And you're going to notice that so much goes back to that, because we should be over here, and yet we're too busy bitching, and we're staying over here. And there's a massive flaw there. And until we can get out of that gook, that junk, I don't think we're ever going to really be able to help anyone, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, Christian, atheist, doesn't matter.
You know, I think that a lot of what we're facing with the issue with being pro-life, is in a lot of ways a cultural issue, and for me, I take the stance, and it's because of my Christian values. But you know what? What's even interesting is that I'll probably get flack from some Christians, because they're, especially in the evangelical Christian movement, a movement to say, you know, let's not talk about these other things because that's socialism and socialism is bad or whatever. When you talk about things like welfare and talking about things like promoting income equality, which some would just say that's a distraction. That, you know, the only reason to be against abortion is because God says it's wrong. I want to go beyond that, because I think obviously anyone who's going to look at the issue is going to say, well, the only reason why you're for something, and I hear this all the time from atheists on other issues, you know, the only reason why you're supporting something is because you're, you know, don't want to go to hell, or because God says no. Whereas to me, I do see the pro-life issue and being pro-life not just a commandment not to do it, not just as a law saying we need to not do that, but that understanding that the bigger issue here is the family. And I from a Christian perspective, to me, that makes sense. How do you look at that? Because a big part of that, and looking at the family from a special Christian viewpoint, understands, in my mind, that there is a importance of having a balance in the family, of having supporting the family, so that these decisions are not made in such, you know, ways. So I mean, how do you take that? Because there's probably going to be people out there, and there probably has been, and I want to talk about that. Christians who do talk about you not qualifying for being pro-life because, you know, how do you come to the same? Can you believe, and do you believe that you can come to the same conclusion about this being a family issue and a cultural issue without having the same spiritual significant values of the family that Christians do?
There's just so much hate on us heathens. So, and I have gotten this a lot, and I think it's sad that with you, it's atheists are going to completely knock off anything you have to say because you believe in God, which should be irrelevant. I don't believe in God, and I'm not going around and raping people and murdering people in their sleep. I'm not. It doesn't matter. That's not the point of this. Even when I believed in God, I never believed I needed God to tell me that killing something was wrong, or killing a person was wrong, or, you know, driving my car into the side of a building was wrong. And I think people use it as a defense mechanism, to be very honest. I think it's because they don't want to continue with a discussion. They would rather just put you away in the corner so they don't have to deal with you. And I think that's a huge problem we're facing. What was the second part of your question? I'm very sorry.
That's okay. What I was saying was, for a lot of Christians, the pro-life thing has a lot of, being pro-life has to do also with being pro-family, and seeing. And I know your background in the Catholic Church, you understand that being pro-family is a huge. It's a very holy thing. The family is a very holy thing, and for a lot of Christian traditions, not evangelical Christians, I want that put out there because evangelical Christians have kind of divorced this from their theological standpoint, but the idea of justification and sanctification through the process of the family and upholding the family. But I would imagine that you probably would have some kind of agreement there that a part of this is about having to do with families and it being a family decision. And I was just asking, how do you come to that without getting the same kind of, sacred? What do you say to someone that says, well, you cannot really uphold the family in the same kind of Christian sense that we do? What would you say to that?
So I was actually baptized Catholic, but I've never been raised Catholic. I was raised Methodist, so very much Lutheran, like you're going between. And I have been going to a traditional Latin Mass for the last 4 years with my husband. But I've actually heard that before. I've been told that in church when people ask me, where, I don't know, if I was Catholic or whatever, and I wasn't Catholic, I believed in God, and people, even while I believed in God, but I wasn't their religion, people couldn't understand how I could hold family values. And I'm an atheist, and I would love like 10 kids. I would have 14 kids. I don't care. I love big families. I want a massive family. I want to be pregnant forever. And I wanted that even when I was pro-choice. And I think even with that, like, I can't care about the family values because of X, Y, and Z. I think it's kind of going back to that defense mechanism. I think people get so tongue-tied when people don't hold their same morals or their same beliefs. Because to me it would be as silly as me looking at I'd almost guarantee there's at least a dozen or so pro-choice mothers watching this. And I would never look at any of them and say, well, you don't really care about family values because you support abortion. That makes no sense. Some of the best moms I know are pro-choice. And a lot of them are atheists. And they're incredible parents. And I think it just has to do with people hate knowing that other people out there disagree with them. And when you get into religion, especially, you have the extremists that think unless you think, feel, breathe, and do as they do, you're practically worthless. You're going to hell. It's like they think they have this magical connection with God to where God is telling them, oh, they're going to go to hell, so you can be mean to them. And if you're religious and you're a good person in my mind and you're religious, that's not how it works.
I get what you're saying there. I want to switch up here and go into an area because obviously we've already established that you have your fair share of critics on both sides. But there has been some criticism about you being pro-life, just you being pro-life in general, and being an atheist. And you've made it open and out there, your experience with the abortion that you had. And some have looked at your story and said, how can you be pro-life and be for that when you had a situation where your father made you have an abortion according to you? Now this is some of the stuff that some of the questions I've been looking at, but and not support someone else's right to be pro-choice. I mean, what would you say to some of those things? And just let us know about your story about becoming pro-life, because I know it's been an emotional journey for you, and I do want to let people know about that because I think that's important in our discussion because we are talking with you on your perspectives on things.
So for anyone out there that doesn't know, I'll make this quick. When I turned 16, I became pregnant and I was coerced into an abortion. I didn't want the abortion, but my dad threatened me with homelessness, and I was young, I was scared, and I didn't know what to do. And I begged my dad to let me keep the child and give it up for adoption, and he said no. So I went to Planned Parenthood in Denver, and I got an abortion. People, and then a little backstory to what John was talking about, people have, I've heard many different things about my story. One, I was never coerced. I made the choice to have an abortion, and I became pro-life, and so I lied about it so I could feel better. I've heard that I've had 2 abortions. I've heard that I've had no abortion. I was actually having a debate with someone yesterday about this too, and I'm really glad it was brought up, because I really want to ask people who have an issue with me and my past, would it matter? Let's say I'd never had an abortion. Would you somehow think more of me being pro-life? I doubt it. I mean, mentally you might think, or you might think right now, of course I'd have like more respect, or I'd talk to you in a more serious tone, but you've had an abortion, and now you want to take it away from people. And so we can't really listen to you. And yet go see someone who's never had an abortion, and they'll say the same thing as that person. I'm not here for you. To be very honest, I am not here for the people that want to just dismiss my story. I do what I do to help young women that were in my situation, and I let my name get out there, so when I get a message from a young girl saying my parents are trying to coerce me into an abortion, I can help her understand that that's not only illegal, but she has options. And for me, it becomes very interesting because I deal with this daily. I have people tell me daily that my story isn't right, or that I want to control women because now that I got the abortion that I always wanted, and I've heard that many times, now I just want to take it away from people. And I look at people when they say that, and I think, and I say, have you ever done anything in your life that you regret? And then later on you realize it was something bad. I've stolen money from my parents. I remember I was like 10 years old and I stole 20 bucks out of my mom's purse, and I felt like a badass. Like I was like shaking. I was so cool. And looking back, I'm like, oh, I was really dumb, and that was really mean. Like, you don't steal from your parents. So because I did it, does that mean that I can never look at someone else and be like, no, I don't agree with that? Because that's what you're doing. Except to me, abortion is even more of an extreme topic.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's never got to be easy. And when you go out there and you share that with people, it's always tough. It's always difficult because there's always going to be people out there who are your critics. You know, he's going to have trolls. You know, haters are always going to hate, as they say. Why do you think it's so shocking for people to say atheist pro-life? Like why for some people they just why would you say abortion has become for a lot of people anonymous? Is it just because a lot of them happen to be liberal? Because I know there's not all atheists are liberal. There's a lot of conservative atheists out there. I want to know why so many in the atheist movement, and I don't know if this is because if it's a trend. I would have to say it's probably a trend more than it is symptomatic of being atheist. At least that's what I would think. What do you think on that?
I actually completely agree with you. I know we talked about this a little bit before, but I feel as though when people leave their religion, because most atheists were atheist or religious at some point, I feel like when they leave, I'm going to take something that you said, John, they divorce everything from that. They want nothing to do with it because a lot of them leave and they hate it. They feel lied to. They feel indoctrinated. And it's like they have to completely strip themselves of everything they had. A bunch of friends that I have that I love dearly, it's been interesting to watch them go through this realization of when I became an atheist, or when they became an atheist, they never questioned why they switched their beliefs. They just became an atheist and everything kind of followed, but they never did research about it. They never actually looked into why they changed them. And it seems like that's kind of where it goes back to, I say atheists treat atheism like a religion, and they shouldn't. It's because they expect you to believe everything they believe while you're an atheist, which has nothing to do with it. And so I would absolutely agree that it's almost a trend, and it's kind of sad. But there's going to be more pro-life atheists out there. Like in D.C., when I head out on the 20th to go over there, I'm going to be meeting up with some of my amazing secular pro-life ladies who are hardcore atheists, and they've been atheists for a long time. And there are so many of us out there, and I think it's just shocking for people because it's not the majority, but we are allowed, we are very proud, and we are very vocal.
What would you say is a benefit that secular or atheist or whatever word, I mean, it seems everybody has a word these days for something that they are, non-Christian, should we say, or non-Judeo-Christian, because I know there's a lot of Jews who are very pro-life. And I'm sure there's probably a significant amount of Muslims out there as well. But for people who are non-religious, for people who are atheist, secular, what do you think people like you can bring to the pro-life movement that's probably a symptom or is part of being an atheist? Like it's because of who you are, being this. What do you think that brings to pro-life, and what do you think pro-life movement can do now if we get more openly active atheists involved?
I think it would begin to dwindle. I think it would begin to dwindle down the well, you just believe in God, because it's going to get to the point where you don't know if that person believes in God. On my public pro-life page, if anyone wants to go check it out, it's just under Albany Rose. I never have religious people talk about God. I get maybe once a month, maybe, and that's being generous. Because it's wonderful how many religious people don't use the Bible for their reasoning, and I do feel like it will get to the point where people aren't going to be shocked when they see one of us. Sorry, my mind just kind of like went play. Can you repeat that?
That's okay. I was just asking some of the benefits atheists bring, or at least one benefit you think being an atheist brings to the movement. And you just named it. You just said it helps free people of that. Let me ask you this. It seems to me, and this is just my personal opinion, Albany, and I want to again thank you for being on this show. You've been an amazing guest. Thank you for spending the time you have with me. I'm sure we probably both have made a few people pissed. But you know, you're not doing something right unless you're pissing somebody off. So,
exactly.
But it seems to me, especially like on this issue, that the Christians are really trying to get into the science and getting into defining life, and they've been very hardcore to do it because for a long time a lot of pro-choice people were talking about the science. But I don't think pro-choice people are talking about the science as much as they are anymore. They're talking very emotional standpoint. They're talking about, and we talked about that, they're talking about women's rights, and they're talking about more emotional reasons for it. To me, it just kind of seems interesting that Christians are not talking about God. They're not talking about religion. They're not talking. They're talking. They may come into some like personal conversations, but overall, when we're talking about abortion and we're talking about the science behind it, we're talking about the facts. That Christians are doing that now, and now you're starting to see a lot of people who see someone like you and go, "Wait a minute, you can't do that. You can't be that way because." You know, you're not upholding to our doctrinal view that you have to be this way. But it just seems to be kind of uprooted now where that tends to be the trend. Why do you think that is? Is that just because atheists, for the most part, are just doing it because, you know, it kind of and it kind of does seem that there's a lot of atheists out there who probably support some of those other things like gay marriage more than they probably would, not that they wouldn't be against it, but that they would be more actively open in talking about it because they know it probably kind of goes against Christianity. I mean, how much do you think atheists being against pro-life, or at least not being as scientific on it as they used to be, is because it's more a reaction towards religion, or it's reaction to something other than the scientific facts that are coming out? Because it seems to me more and more now that more people on the pro-life movement are talking about that, whereas on the pro-choice are talking more about people and emotions?
I think the pro-choice movement never thought they would lose their footing. And I don't say this to piss people off. While I have my moments, I'm not in this to piss anyone off. I'm in this to make people think, just as I expect you to say something that'll make me think. Sarcastic jabs are silly. I don't think they ever thought they would lose their momentum. Take the DC rally. It started at like a couple thousand, and last year they estimated almost 650,000 people marched at DC for the right to life. That number is amazing. And I know the counter-protest group, I think 50 is generous for what they tend to get. And I think that they're uncomfortable getting as emotional as they are, because both sides can use science whatever way they want. And in the end, it's still the same science. It's just been how you want to use it. But when you see abortion being taken away, or it's pushed down to 20 weeks, heaven forbid, people freak out. And instead of using logic to rationalize why they're upset that women can't have abortions later, they get emotional. They show their fear, their anger. And the more they do that, and the more they continue to, the more people that are pro-choice and they get mad at me simply for being a pro-life atheist, that just shows me the pro-choice movement is crumbling. So think about that, everyone out there that's pro-choice, and you get mad at me, because you're focusing all your energy and your hatred and your anger on me and what I think simply because of my other beliefs or lack thereof, instead of working on helping women or working on laws. And right now the pro-life movement, our focus is it's laws, it's helping women, it's making sure crisis pregnancy centers begin to help women and their children up to 13 years old. I think that's amazing. That's wonderful. We need more places like that. And I think it's just their emotion is showing more than I think it ever has. I mean, I remember when I was pro-choice, and we didn't really have to worry about laws. I mean, abortion was cool, and it was there, and people could get it. And now it's really starting to be questioned, and people are really starting to think, is this moral, or where's the cutoff point? And I think they're just losing their footing, and it's going to be the end of them.
Well, to me personally, I think the first thing that really started the momentum, and as much as I don't like a lot of his other policies, I will be eternally grateful for what George W. Bush did on ending second-term abortions, or late-term abortions, and putting that out there.
He ended partial birth abortion.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say, partial birth. Sorry, not late birth. Partial birth, that's what I meant. Sorry, thank you. I am corrected. That's what I meant to say. I don't know why I said. Yeah, partial birth abortions. And I think, there's been a lot of movement towards those kinds of things. But I do think it's kind of interesting that you do see the pro-choice people, and they're getting very violent. I see videos all the time where there are protesters, and there's one woman, it's like the fury of hell came out of her. She rips up the guy's billboard. She tells him, "It's a fetus, it's a fetus." It's like all in his face. And she punched him and then walked away. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of people in the pro-life, they know that they can't be violent for one reason, because that's going to be some undue criticism. But it's almost as if people in the pro-life movement are taking a cue from MLK, from Martin Luther King Jr., and saying, look, let's not do it. Let's not, as we walk through the streets asking for this thing to happen, civil rights, and yet they got these angry white Southern people getting all over their faces. It just kind of seems to be, and it's interesting because I see that a lot now in the pro-life movement. There's an era of it that's a lot like the civil rights movement of the 60s. And there's a lot of quotes from civil rights people. Do you think it's becoming more evident to people that this is more than just a who can do what with their body, but we're actually talking about rights? Like, this is becoming a full-fledged civil rights movement for the unborn.
No, I absolutely see that it's going there. When I became pro-life 3 years ago, I was new. I thank so many of the pro-life leaders who now are dear friends of mine, because without them, I don't know if I'd even be here. And I saw everything much more emotional. And I knew laws were trying to be passed, but they just weren't happening. And then a year and a half ago, it's like this tidal wave just hit everything. And abortion is no longer something that's under the rug. Maybe a foot's under there because it's still afraid and people are still unsure of how to bring it up. But just like when Roe v. Wade was going on and Doe versus Bolton, it's coming into the light again. It's becoming more aired, and the more people that talk about it from whatever side, it's going to be as it was 40 years ago. It's going to be publicized as much, and I'm glad for that, honestly. This needs to be a topic that is always talked about. It's just how it is. It needs to be, and I think it's going to go in that direction more and more, and much more quickly than we think.
Do you think having people like the real Roe and other pro-abortion, pro-choice heroes of the 60s and 70s and early 80s are coming out and now are saying, I regret my abortion, I regret having this, and they're coming out and saying, I'm pro-life. Do you think that's had a tremendous impact on the pro-life movement?
Oh, absolutely. Norma, the woman that basically instigated Roe v. Wade, when she came out saying that she was basically used and she never had an abortion and she wasn't raped, that was huge. That was massive for the pro-life movement, and she's incredibly vocal. I mean, this woman is a complete sweetheart. She's just beautiful inside and out. And I think people don't know how to take that. People don't know how to look. You're looking at, like you kind of used, because you said the real Roe. People don't know how to look at the person who helped make abortion legal and who's now going, no, I regret that every day of my life. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's good. So, did you have? I will let you have this. Any final thoughts on tonight's issue and on anything? I'll kind of give you a few minutes just to have it open to address anything you want to do, and then let people know where they can follow you, where you can see some of your videos, and where they can follow you at.
Yeah, no, thank you. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. Just type in Albany Rose. There's only one of me. If you look me up, I want to ask that you remain respectful. I don't believe in showing graphic images. I am open to dialogue. I do not use words like murder and pro-abortion. I will never call someone a baby killer, whether you've had 1 abortion or 10 abortions or an abortion at 6 weeks or 30 weeks. There are people like this, and it's this dialogue that we need to get out there. Most of the work I do actually focuses on helping the pro-life movement, on correcting the pro-life movement. You don't have to like me because I'm pro-life, and you probably hate me because I'm pro-life and an atheist, which is silly, but a lot of people are. But this internal fighting, not only between pro-choice and pro-life, but my pro-lifers that are watching, until we fix everything wrong with us, we're never going to help. And to me, it isn't one side that's pro-woman and the other side's anti-woman. And I try to get that out in pretty much every video and everything I say. You can be pro-life and pro-woman, you can be pro-choice and pro-woman. There's no rule on that. But to me, the only way we can be pro-woman is working together to help these women, to help their children, born, unborn, to help them financially, to help them, with the children that they already have when it comes to food or education. There's so much more to this than bickering. There's so much more to this than you not wanting to believe that I had an abortion and that someone could have possibly pushed someone into an abortion. That is my focus. While you don't have to like me or people like me that are against abortion, understand that there is more than just I want to keep abortion legal, and I want to make abortion illegal. There's so much in the middle, and that is what we need to focus on before we get to these extremes. So, John, I don't know if you want to talk about anything else, but regardless, I had such fun tonight. I want to thank you for having me on here, and I very much would love to be on your show again.
Well, you're definitely welcome, and I think we can go into more. You know, this is kind of an intro thing, so it's like there's a lot of nuance that could be explored. And I'm very interested, too, as well, as discussing some of your ideas on atheism as well, because it does seem that you tend to be a pretty open-minded atheist, that you are acknowledging some of the things. And I'm an open-minded Christian, so I think we're two peas in a pod that way. But I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to let people know that they can watch John Moseman live on my website at johnmoseman.net. And between live episodes, you can watch. And also, Albany, I was going to ask if you could stay for a few minutes after we log off. I just wanted to mention a couple things to you. But thank you for being here. But I want to let people know you can go to johnmoseman.net to check out my live show. It's right there on the homepage. Between live episodes, you can watch the last previous episode, which is the one. So until the next time I'm on, and then also, it will be next week, next Tuesday. I'm airing a new program called John Moseman Live Unplugged. It will be kind of similar to what this is because my camera wasn't working. But it's not so much an interview show as it is talking about issues, almost like a podcast. And then let you know on Thursdays you can catch me on YouTube on Badman Country, which are my Bannister, if you like atheist versus Christian debate. Anyways, I do have to get going, but thank you again for our guest. Thank you for those who watched us live. And remember, if you have questions or comments for this show or any show, please feel free, even if it is after the fact, even if it's not during the live show, please feel free to give them, and we can respond. And if you had some for Albany, I'm sure she can come on and she'd be willing to do responses to that, and she's probably willing to go on YouTube herself and directly say, here's my responses to what you have to say. So, anyways, farewell, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight live. I'm John Moseman. This is John Moseman Live.